So I'm Bruce Gilson. I want to welcome you back to another segment of our Knowledge Basics. Today we're going to be talking about the software side of LED video walls. Okay, now for this part, we've connected to our simple LED wall here, and we're going to start from scratch. We're going to build it from the beginning. I've loaded my Nova LCT software. It's opened up. Right here, it's telling me that it's got one control system connected, which is correct. I've got one control system over here to talk to the wall. I'm in my basic mode. As we covered a moment ago, to get into advanced mode, I click on User. I go to Advanced User Settings, and I type in 666 as my password, which is the standard password for Novastar logins. We log in, it gives me a little bit more options here, and I want to go into my screen configuration. Click on screen configuration. It's going to ask me how are you talking to it. We're talking to it via USB, so that's correct. You don't need to worry about this saying Europe. You can change it to American if you want to, but we're going to click next. That's actually talking about a cloud, which we're not talking to the cloud today. Once again, we're going to skip the sending card because we're going to be using a manufacturer-based sending card. So we're going to go to receiving card. Once we get into our receiving card, we're going to load the file from our manufacturer, the RCFG file. Right here is it that I've downloaded and put it on my desktop. I'm going to click OK, open it up. It's going to open that file. And then I'm going to say send to receiving cards. Oh, I jumped the gun. That's fine. Now that it's told me it's loaded, I'm going to send it to the receiving cards. It's going to ask me, do you want to send to all of them? Yes, I want to send it to all receiving cards. It's going to take a moment and it's going to tell me that, okay, it's been sent successfully. Now we're going to go to our screen connection. I'm going to reset this from the last one that we had. Our simple wall, if we go to our software, is 2 columns and 3 rows. So we're going to go back to our software here. We're going to tell it that we have 2 columns and we have 3 rows. And it's going to rebuild the wall. We also want to make sure that on our receiving card size, it matches the manufacturer. So if you go back to our receiving card tab, 192 by 192, our screen connection or receiving card sees 192 by 192, so that is correct. And you can see here, I did columns and rows backwards. It's actually 3 columns, 2 rows. So I'm going to change that again. 3 columns, 2 rows. Send that. Now, in our example document, this time I said that I started down here in the bottom left corner. When I got to the bottom right corner, I went up and then I come back around. So that's the way that we're going to tell it that it was wired up. Oops, excuse me, hit the wrong button. So on port 1, we started down here at the bottom. And we're going to go around, we're going to go up, and we're going to come back, and we end there. Okay? Now we want to send that to our hardware. When we send that to the hardware, it's going to take that information, and it's actually going to send it to our wall so that our wall gets its configuration. It says that it's been sent successfully, and now we've sent to our wall. But as you notice here, I still don't have anything on my wall. What I can click here is I can click Enable Mapping. When I click Enable Mapping, it's going to send mapping to the wall, and it's going to pop up on my screen, which it didn't do. So now we've got a problem, and we've got to troubleshoot this problem. There's a couple of important things when troubleshooting your video wall. In this particular example, it does not have any data, popping up on it. So because we just reloaded the RCFG file, which is the very first step in troubleshooting, now I can go try a couple of different things. I'm going to minimize this portion and I'm going to go to my screen control. Inside of screen control, it gives me a couple of real simple options. And instead of being in normal mode, we're going to send red to the wall. When I send red to the wall, something interesting has happened. My mapping has popped up on my wall and red has popped up on the wall. It's really important to note where the red is being generated. In this particular example, I've clicked on screen control and I've told it to send red. That red is actually being generated inside of every panel. It's not being generated from my software. What's important about that is by sending it from my software to the wall, and then the wall generating the red, I know that I do have a communication signal, and I know that my panels are responding to my software. If I wanted to send the red or whatever test pattern it is, and I don't want it to come from the panel, but I want it to come from my controller, I would send that data directly from my controller. A lot of controllers, most of the controllers we work with, have an LCD screen on the front. You just click through the menus, you go to your test patterns, and you would send red from there. If you do it from your controller, that means that that test pattern, that red, whatever it is, it's coming from your controller. If you do it right here on screen control, it's coming from inside the panel. As soon as I did that, then my mapping popped up. So from the video, you can see here that my mapping says that this right here is port 1, panel 1. Port 1, panel 2, port 1, panel 3, port 1, panel 4, port 1, panel 5, and port 1, panel 6. So that's correct, but you might also notice that it's all upside down. In this particular example, we're ground stacked, which means that those panels, they're flipped upside down and they need to be rotated. So I'm going to take my my control screen, going to go back to normal. I'm going to send normal back to the wall. I'm going to close it. And then on my screen configuration, I'm going to jump back in here, go to my receiving cards, and I'm going to set a rotation. Sometimes your video wall is on its edge and you're going tall. Sometimes your video wall is upside down like this one is because we're ground stacked. Most of the time you're going to have a fly bar going across the top and you're going to build straight down and you want 0 rotation. But in our example, we want 180 degrees rotation. So I'm going to click on that 180 degrees and I'm going to send 180 degrees rotation to all of my panels. All right, I've sent that to my panels. I'm going to go back to my screen I jumped the gun again. Go back to my screen connection, and my screen connection should not have changed. It should see that we've got all the panels, but I still don't have any image on my screen. So if I look at my controller, which we're not focused on controllers today, we're really focused on software. Controller, you might need to look up a video specific to the controller that you're working with. But if I look at my controller tells me that my HDMI signal is not active. So I'm going to simply, on my laptop that I'm pushing video image from, I'm going to make sure that it is sending from the HDMI. And then I also want to make sure that my controller is looking at the correct port. I've got it currently looking at HDMI 1. I want to check and see if it's in HDMI 1. Now that we've verified that we're in HDMI 1, I'm going to tell the controller to look at HDMI 1, and we've now had image pop up on our screen. Because I rotated in our settings, now we have down here panel 1 on port 1. Let me tell you at least what the S stands for. The S stands for server, so we only have one server connected. So it's saying it's server 1. If you had multiple servers connected, It could be telling you where it's getting that signal. So it might be getting that signal from server 2. But in this situation, server 1, port 1, panel 1. Port 1, panel 2, port 1, panel 3. Then we go up, port 1, panel 4, port 1, panel 5, and port 1, panel 6. And I've still got that mapping laid on top of my image. That's because I turned mapping on earlier. So I would need to go back, click mapping closed, mapping turns off, and now you can see the background of my computer. Now in this particular situation, the panels look correct. That's what my background looks like. And I can move something over there so you can see that that is indeed my computer. But what if it doesn't look right? What if it looks weird? Well, I'm going to actually send the wall the wrong image so that you can get an idea of what it looks like when it doesn't look correct. So let's say that I forgot that I was supposed to map the wall from me looking at it, and I decided to map the wall backwards. So I start in the wrong corner, I finish in the wrong corner, I send that to the hardware, I say okay. Now you can see that my background, it does not look right. It has all kinds of different issues. And in reality, it's because I told it that it's starting its image here, that it's moving its image. Then I've made a mistake in the way that all these panels are laid out. So anytime that you have clear image, the image is clear, but the data looks wrong, probably means that you have a mapping problem. So you want to go back, think for a moment, hey, I'm looking at the wall, the way that the wall is wired up. Maybe you're going to go behind the wall, check and make sure your wiring is correct. And then you realize, oh, you know what? I wired it differently and I need to go back to the other way that it was wired. So I'm going to reset that wiring. I'm going to go back this way and I'm going to send that to hardware, and that's correct. I also want to give you an example of what it looks like when you get your rotation wrong. In this example, our wall is upside down. So what if we forgot to rotate the wall? Well, it does a couple of different interesting things. Not only are your panels technically, if it's rotated, would they be in the wrong orientation, but then also your panels would be in the wrong order because your rotation is also wrong. So in this particular example, I have forgotten to do my rotation, and now I've got a jumbled mess of images. If you see something like this, where once again, there's clarity in what the image should be, but it's just all completely in the wrong order, ask yourself, first off, if your panels are rotated. Then you can ask yourself, do you have it wired up correctly? Then you can ask yourself, is my screen configuration wired in such a way that it matches the way that I actually physically wired it? So to fix this one more time, we're going to go over here to our rotation. We're going to rotate it 180 degrees. We're going to send that to our hardware. And then the wall is going to respond and show us the way it's actually set up. Those are a couple of notes, real important notes when you're trying to troubleshoot a wall. What happens? What are some potential, to deal with? And then as you get deeper into setting up walls, you can begin to go to Novastar's training. They've got webinars. The webinars are fairly long, so we tried to hit the highlights today. And you can get it much deeper into the software and controllers. That's the basics, though. That's the basics of what we would do. And thank you so much for taking time to focus on video walls and how we can install them properly.